Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mock COP26's closing ceremony. We're so excited to have you here with us today. As we wait for a few more people to join us, I want to invite everyone to go to pigeonhole.at/mockcop to contribute to the Wordle that has been populated throughout the event. Now let's begin by introducing ourselves as your host for this ceremony. My name is Malika Collette. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm 17 years old. I am one of the 18 event coordinators for Mock COP, and I live in Canada. I'm so excited to be hosting alongside some of the other amazing staff at Mock COP26. I'm now going to pass it over to Pauline to introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Pauline Owiti. I'm student staff. I'm from Kenya in Africa. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, I'm Josh. I am currently in the UK. I live in the UK, and I'm replacing Luca, who sadly wasn't able to make it this afternoon for people in our time zone, because she's just been hit by a really bad storm. So I'm stepping in. It's lovely to meet you all.
Hello, I'm Bea Dolores from the Philippines. I'm 24, and yeah, it's really nice to see you all here.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kelu, and I'm from Nigeria, and it's nice. I'm happy to join you guys.
Hello, everybody. I'm Via from Brazil, one of the student staff of Mock COP, and it's really good to see you all.
Wow, it is such an honor to be hosting this closing ceremony along with Josh, Pauline, B, and Kello. Now that some more people have joined us, I'm really excited to jump into the actual ceremony. It's so incredible to be here at the closing ceremony with so many of you watching and participating, and having done so for the past 2 weeks as well. Mock COP26 was created to fill the void of COP26, and personally, I do not feel that it fell short of this goal. Although the idea for this event came up early in the summer, the real planning did not begin until September. The last 3 months of planning and now 2 weeks of powerful statements, speeches, and panels have been a true message to the world on what youth can and will do for climate action. This closing ceremony will not disappoint. We have an incredible lineup planned for you today, with some youth speakers and the long-awaited presentation of the treaty, along with some other incredible high-profile speakers. I'm now going to pass it over to Kello and Josh to share some of the amazing statistics and recaps from the past 2 weeks.
Yes, thank you for that, Malika. So on YouTube, which is the platform that we've live streamed and where you can still see all of the speaker videos and recordings from throughout the event, we received over 11,000 channel views, which made up over 900 hours of watch time. We had 663 new subscribers over the course of Mock COP. Our opening ceremony was the most viewed video with 1,598 views, and the most popular age of our viewers, which made up 45% of all of our viewers, were people aged 18 to 24. The countries where most of our viewers came from were the UK, France, USA, and India.
We had an amazing social media engagement with close to 7,000 followers across all our social media handles, with Twitter taking the lead at 2,719 followers, followed by Instagram at 2,660 followers, and we had about 992 followers and 532 followers at Facebook and LinkedIn, respectively. The hashtag MockCOP26 was mentioned 2.4 million times, and that's incredible.
And on media coverage, we received an unprecedented amount of media coverage, and we're really, really excited about it. We had over 250 online articles, 35 national articles, and 60 broadcast features. We spread our message, and it reached a total of 60 million people around the world, and climbing. We've got this beautiful coverage from Channel 4 News, CNN, BBC, Climate Change News, World Economic Forum, Reuters, and most recently from Emergency on Planet Earth. And a filmmaker, James Lavelle, even shared with us his film, Race for Future, which features our voices as youth determined to solve the climate crisis.
We had over 330 delegates from around 142 countries working together across different time zones to shape our high-level statement. We are very grateful and inspired by their passion and commitment. These young people are some of the most talented people I've ever met, and we thank them enough.
I'm going to go over a few of our event highlights, and we're really excited about all of the things that have happened over the past week. But here are a few quotes that particularly highlight it. One of our delegates said, "The world we want is one where we are safe from climate impacts and where we are part of the decision making." And we agree so much with that statement. Another said, "We are praised for enthusiasm, but politicians are not taking us seriously enough." We are praised for enthusiasm, the same thing twice, sorry about that. Now we are asking our governments to step up and give us the spaces we need to become a significant part of the conversation. One of our volunteers from Portugal, who's 11 years old, said, "Mock COP26 is my hope for a better future. Being a volunteer for Mock COP26 is guiding my future to the right direction. I want to thank everyone who made this possible, as I tend to lose hope and get frustrated, but Mock COP26 has given me confidence in myself and has opened my eyes to climate change more than ever, so thank you." Julia, from We Have the Power, said, "I'm incredibly proud to have been the first funder of Mock COP, and as a lawyer I was honoured to help draft their treaty. The treaty is ambitious but realistic, and I'm blown away by their professionalism, determination and work ethic from these young climate leaders." James Thornton, who's the CEO of Client Earth, has said, "Decisions taken by governments now will affect the youngest generation for years to come, but it's time to listen to young people and implement their urgent demands." And lastly, Rhiannon Osborne, who's a policy advocacy director at Students for Global Health, has said, "Keep building the mental vision of the world you have and the world you want to see. Having a utopian vision about where you can go as a global society can give you hope and motivate you to keep fighting." We had a very special fringe event right at the release of the high-level statements, where delegates had the opportunity to create a letter to the Earth. The organisers' Letters to the Earth feel that these letters somehow are special counterparts to the high-level statement, offering an insight to the hearts and feelings of the youth, often in our pain. They often move a listener to a different way than our political statement.
Yes, Josh. These letters came from the delegates of Romania, Nigeria, confused which are about what they feel about the state of the planet in the future and what changes they want to see. Listen as we give voices to these beautiful letters to our planet Earth.
It is now my honor to read Adelina's letter to the Earth. Adelina is from Romania. "Hello? Is anybody out there? This is a call from Terra. This is our last call. I am the last human on Earth. If anyone can hear me, we couldn't do it. We couldn't find another planet. We couldn't change the course. We've lost our fight. We've lost our home. Our people, our nature, and everything is dead. All our money and technology, all our advancements and collective intelligence couldn't save us from our own greed. If there was someone out there, no matter how far, no matter how developed and advanced you are, please remember what so many humans forgot. that nature is who created us and not the other way around.
I will be reading Paul Ayomide's letter. Dear Mother Earth, this might be my last message to you. I'm in anguish, bleeding uncontrollably and completely helpless. At the Genesis, I was alone in the whole fragment with little or no scaffold. As the evolution would have it, humans came into existence, just like you taught me to be accommodating, protective, providing, and supportive. I extended this act of kindness to them, absorbing excess heat for their well-being, providing food and source of livelihood for them, and advanced sight of nature at no expense. Oh, what a grievous error I made. Humans, after discovering few of many things I'm made of, came at me, married me, disbanded, overexploited me continuously, and sent daily recruits of armies of plastic to continuously defile my kingdom. Despite their continuous grievous act towards me, always, I never stopped playing my role in keeping them safe. Am I no more mother? Human deprived me of my right of existence. Ocean.
The delegate, whom we know as Bia, wrote this emotional letter. Dear Earth, in name of the most dangerous species to Earth, I am sorry. I'm sorry to be destroying you while you still keep us alive. I'm sorry to be destroying the other animals while they're not doing anything to harm us. We know that you don't want climate change to be happening. Me neither. But unfortunately, I was already born at the time when global warming was already real. Me, you, and the youth are trying to speak about the emergency of this problem. However, no one is listening and doing enough to revert the situation. We could use our intelligence to make incredible things and not to destroy, because this does not need intelligence. Doing this, we are hurting yourself, and the others. We know how it is to be unheard. We know how it is to be filled with empty words and false promises, and we understand you. For many centuries, the human species was and is surrounded by their selfishness and lack of empathy with other communities, just ambitious about money. But we can't live from money. I know how tired you are of being cut, burned, mistreated, sold, and misunderstood. I just wanted to say that I feel the same thing. It's like all the time I see a natural disaster and consequences of climate change happening. I also see my future passing. I see them trying to steal my future, my dreams, and my goals from me. I know that you will have a deadline if they continue acting like now. Us youth are doing everything we can. We are really trying to tell them about your importance, but they silence us. They make jokes about us and never take us seriously as they should. We and you are going to suffer in the future, not them. They could guarantee their future while mine and many other generations' futures are uncertain. I understand how much hard work you did through billions of years, but I don't understand how they don't value this and destroy you in less than a century. Just when the last fish dies, the last drinkable water, and the last pure air breathed, the last tree cut, they will finally listen to us and notice that we can't breathe, drink, and eat money. But then it'll be too late. I'm sorry. From Bia.
Wow, those letters are so powerful. They truly each tug our heartstrings and just hold so much weight. Thank you, Pauline and Bea, for reading those, and thank you to the delegates that wrote those. We appreciate you having those shared with us today.
Although we do have some very nice things ahead, right?
Yes, that's right. Next up is our photo competition. Beginning on Sunday, November 29th, just a few days ago, a photo competition has been opened, where we asked our delegates, our volunteers, and the public to post one photo on social media showing the impacts of climate change where they live, with a caption of no more than 50 words, and to tag us. We've received so many incredible entries, heart-wrenchingly sad, awful images depicting firsthand the impacts that people are already facing around the world. Thank you so much to everyone who participated in the competition and shared your images. We understand for some, sharing such difficult images with hard memories attached can be hard, but we know how crucial it is to share these images to continue to share the impacts the climate crisis is already having. It is now my pleasure to present the winner of Mock COP's photo competition, Anjolo from Kenya, with this image. The caption reads, "Here I am at the Malari slums in Kenya, facing the poor waste management program. Look at the animals grazing at this site. And you know what? It'll be on our plates too. Look at that air pollution also." So there's the image up there on the slide that was presented, and we'll also be sharing some more of the amazing entries that we received on social media. So follow along to see some more of them. It is now my great honor to introduce our first speaker, Dr. David Boyd. Dr. David Boyd is the UN Special Reporter on Human Rights and the Environment. We are so grateful to have his support during this event. So now let's turn our attention over to him.
Hello from Canada. I'm Dr. David Boyd, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and the Environment. And I have to say, I'm absolutely delighted and honored to be part of the closing ceremonies for the Mock COP26. You know, climate change is one of the most critical challenges that humanity has ever faced. And we have known about this problem for decades now, since before many of you participating in this event were even born. Nations of the world came together in 1992 and signed the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, making a solemn commitment to avoid dangerous anthropogenic interference with the Earth's climate system. We now know conclusively that we are on the precipice of dangerously interfering with that climate system, and this has terrible consequences for people's human rights. In my work as the UN Special Rapporteur, I have visited countries as far-flung as Fiji and Norway and witnessed firsthand the impacts that climate change is having. In Fiji, I visited a small indigenous village called Vunidongoloa, formerly a tropical paradise, but because of storm surges, rising sea levels, and saltwater contamination of their water supply, this whole community had to be relocated inland. In Norway, north of the Arctic Circle, I spent 3 days with the Sami indigenous people, whose culture, whose economy, for hundreds of years has been based on reindeer herding. And yet climate change is causing havoc on those traditional practices because they're getting rain in northern Norway, north of the Arctic Circle, which forms ice, and the reindeer simply cannot scrape through the ice to get at the mosses and lichens that would ordinarily have sustained them. Even here in Canada, on this beautiful island where I live, earlier this year, we had the worst air quality on Earth for a few days because of smoke from wildfires blazing out of control in the United States. So this is an urgent problem, and it's absolutely infuriating to see that governments are still not treating this urgent problem like an emergency. I mean, the act of postponing COP26 for a year, kicking the can down the road, is absolutely inexcusable in light of what we know about the climate emergency. And if we look at the trajectory of global greenhouse gas emissions since 1992, when the Framework Convention on Climate Change was signed, they have risen by over 60%. That is an absolute failure on behalf of governments and businesses and wealthy people around the world. So something has to change. And I believe that by taking a rights-based approach, by demanding that governments respect, protect, and fulfill our right to live in a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, which absolutely includes clean air and the right to a safe climate, we can catalyze accelerated action to deal with climate change. And this is where youth come in. You know, a year ago, before the pandemic struck, youth activism was having a profound influence on the climate change debate. Young people in the streets marching, millions of people. Young people filing lawsuits based on their rights. Young people running for political office at very young ages, acting as lawyers, going to university to train as scientists. All of these actions are critical, and we're beginning to have an impact. We're putting unprecedented levels of pressure on governments all around the world. And change is happening, my friends. I think it's really critically important to recognize that progress is being made. Oh yes, we have to move more quickly. But for example, in the last 20 years, the total amount of solar panels generating electricity in the world has increased by over 600 times. And last year, over 90% of all new electricity generating capacity was renewables. Solar is the cheapest form of electricity in most parts of the world today. And that's a really exciting sign for the future. We're also seeing increased commitments from countries. The European Union now says they'll reduce emissions 60% below 2010 levels by 2030. That's a big commitment. We're seeing commitments from countries as diverse as China, Japan, South Korea, and Canada committing to zero emissions, net zero emissions by 2050. And that's good, but it's not enough. We have to have emissions reductions, dramatic emission reductions in the next 10 years. And that means action now. And that's why it's so exciting that you have gotten together hundreds of people from more than 150 countries around the world in this mock climate COP, Conference of the Parties 26. And I think I just want to say thank you to all of you for the incredible work that you're doing on behalf of this beautiful planet that we're also lucky to call home, and all of the people whom we love. You have articulated so clearly, so boldly, a vision for an equitable, sustainable, healthy, and prosperous future. And so I congratulate you for the work that you're doing, and I wish you all good health and good luck in the years ahead. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. David Boyd. It's such an honor to have your support during this event. I loved how you talked about the impact on countries like ours, Canada, where I and him are from. As a developed country, we still see the impacts, even if it's not as large as many of the developing nations. I also liked how you touched on the bits of how you've traveled and seen the much more severe impacts. So thank you so much for all that you have done and that you've continued to do for us. Thank you again, and I'll now pass it over to Bea to introduce our next speaker.
Yes, last but not the least is my fellow Filipina lady who's all around the news lately. And of course, she also did an Instagram takeover on mock COP26. Here we have Mitzi Janelle Tan. Mitzi is the co-founder and international convener of Youth Advocates for Climate Action Philippines, or YACAP. YACAP actually means hug in the Philippines. She is also active on Fridays for Future International, advocating for climate justice and making sure that the voices of Asia strikers and MAPA, or the most affected people in areas strikers, are heard, amplified, and given space. She first became an activist in 2017 after integrating with indigenous leaders of her country, which pushed her to realize that system change is what we need for a just and greener society.
The climate crisis is here. We've heard this said countless times, but we're still seeing how leaders are ignoring the gravity of the statement. We've seen fires, floods, droughts, sea level rising, all impacting people's lives today. In the Philippines, Typhoon Haiyan killed at least 6,340 people. 7 years later, the most impacted areas still haven't recovered completely from the devastation. Last year, we saw the highest record of internal displacements because of climate calamities, with majority of people displaced from South and Southeast Asia. The ravaging fires across Latin America and the US, the water crisis in Africa, the islands that have literally sunk in the Pacific because of sea level rising. Some brand climate activists as alarmists, but the thing is, reality is alarming. These are just the facts. We aren't just fighting for our future, we are fighting for our present. I am Mitzi Janelle Tan, convener of Youth Advocates for Climate Action Philippines and active in Fridays for Future International, working towards making sure that the most affected peoples and areas' voices, or MAPA's voices, are amplified, heard, and given space. Something I've always wondered about is how leaders, especially those from the global north, are supposed to make climate policies when they've most probably never truly experienced and understood the urgency of the climate crisis that we're living in. I have such vivid memories of staying in the dark, having to eat dinner by the candlelight because there's no electricity, because of the raging storm outside. Sitting down in my room cold and afraid that a tree might just fall on our house and ruin our roof. Having to wake up in the middle of the night to scoop out flood water that's entering our room and our house. This is our reality. Having to listen to a battery-powered radio with no electricity to find out if our relatives are still okay, to find out how much destruction is happening outside our homes. And the thing is, I'm still one of the more privileged ones. People are still more affected by this. There are so many worst cases that need to be amplified. There's so many voices that need to be listened to, yet we don't have spaces in climate negotiations. We're not being focused. Our stories aren't being amplified in media. And we're seeing COP26 next year is going to be organized by all white European men. And the thing is, this privileged class, they get to decide how our entire world goes forward, how our entire world adapts to the climate crisis, and how
Okay. Thank you, dear Mitzi, for your speech, as always. You've got this ever incredible dedication and passion, and yep, even though we weren't able to finish the video, you are really setting an example of genuine care to the oppressed and to our environmental defenders. Thank you for what you're continuing to do, and you are really an inspiration to me as a fellow Filipino. I myself is not that directly involved in in-person activities unlike you, but you are really giving me that inspiration. So super thank you, Mitzi. And if not for you, I wouldn't have this much drive and passion that I have right now. It's so nice to have met you. And truly, thanks to you, we realize that it is really, truly only through empathy that we can truly move this world towards a better direction.
We have a very prominent personality in our midst today in the person of Nigel Topping. Nigel Topping is the UK high-level champion for climate action at COP26 and the CEO of Women Business, a coalition of businesses working to accelerate the transition to a zero carbon future. Welcome, sir. We're very honored to have you in our midst today.
Hi, Keller. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, sir, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you do as a champion for climate action?
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank the Teach the Future and Fridays for the Future International and all of you for doing an amazing job in organising the mock COP and for inviting me. It's an honor and it's inspiring to see what you're doing. I mean, my background, I was born in Scotland, in Glasgow, where we're going to be next year in a snowstorm. Actually, yesterday, November 30th. It's not snowing in Glasgow now, right? When I was a kid, snow was normal. That's changed because of climate change. And I kind of ended up doing this work by accident. My grandfather was a Quaker, and that was really important to me. And he really instilled in me the importance of valuing everybody and some very strong ideas of justice. So part of what brings me to this work is a strong sense of the unfairness, and that's both there's asymmetry everywhere. We know that, right? It's north, south, it's young, old, it's wealthy, it's poor. But also I'm drawn to this through a love of the wild. Like my father spent time in Iceland and Spitsbergen, and I was lucky enough to be a young climber and spend time in Greenland and Patagonia and see firsthand the evidence of accelerating climate change. And funnily enough, so 3 of my best friends are glaciologists, so I've had a sort of front seat as their understanding has grown. And So I've been drawn to this work for quite a long time now. I have a role of this funny role of high-level climate action champion since February, and I work closely with Gonzalo Munoz from Chile. The role was created in Paris to recognize that governments on their own can't solve this crisis, that we need businesses, investors, cities, regions, civil society, everybody. So my job is to work with everybody who's not a government to try and mobilize as much ambition and action as possible, and then use that to help encourage governments to be more ambitious themselves.
Thank you very much, sir. One last question that I would like to ask you. What are you most excited about going forward? What is the potential that you think more COP26 we have in the lead-up of COP26?
Well, you know, I've been doing this work for 13 years, and I remember when Fridays for the Future became a significant voice. It did two things, right? It changes the politics. Politicians listen to you. I know it doesn't always feel like it, right? Because you don't get immediate feedback, but politicians hear you. They know that change is coming, and they see the volume, they see the professionalism, they see the clarity. But you know, it also, you know, it saddens me a bit when I hear this sort of no one's done anything or no one's listening. A lot of people have been doing a lot for a long time to try and tackle this crisis. They haven't succeeded yet. Don't ever forget though that you're not joining a community that had no one in it before. There are thousands of people who've been working for 20, 30, 40 years. I remember just a year ago, I ran a workshop for 25 NGOs working on very specifically on EU legislation to decarbonize industry. And I started by asking everyone what gave them hope. And 24 out of the 25 said the fact that young people are making their voices heard. So what excites me the most is the fact that you're doing this, that you're sending a loud signal and a very professional one of expecting more from leaders around the world, and never underestimate how significant that is. You know, you are being heard, and I will do whatever I can to make sure that more people hear that. It's very significant what you're doing.
Thank you very much, sir. We are so honored and inspired to have you join us today. Thank you once again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nigel, for taking the time out of your day to come and be with us. We really appreciate it. Now we're going to go over to that exciting point in the closing ceremony that we're going to be releasing the policies put forward by the over 330 delegates from over 140 countries who took part in the conference. They submitted these policy ideas, and then an incredible legal team put them all together into the legal words and terms that they're now in. And these were voted on during 2 caucus days and full of discussions from our delegates from around the world. Following the 2 caucus days, all of the votes were tallied and 18 policies have now been voted in to be included in our global treaty. For the next portion of the ceremony, we will have Via, a student staff member from Brazil, joining us to try and make this presentation even more global when we read out our global statement. Hello, Via. Lovely to have you.
Hi. Now we have like all the continents represented, and just not Antarctica because like we don't have stuff for that. So you can continue now. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is the open letter that Mock COP26 have sent to all world leaders. And so we're going to start by reading through that. And it starts, "Dear leaders, we are writing to inform you that we, the young people of 140 countries, ran our own inclusive online climate conference, Mock COP26, which concluded today. In light of the COVID-19 pandemic, many of you presumably thought it was a lesser priority to take climate change action through the UNFCCC COP this year, and hence the UN postponed it. We remind you that we are still in a climate emergency, and as well as an ecological crisis, and every moment of inaction makes things worse for our generation. We felt strongly that you should not delay action further, so we decided to run our own youth-led COP this year. We are tired of empty climate promises and are purely motivated by a desire to see real action."
With just 3 months of planning, we delivered a full 2 weeks global conference from November 19 to December 1st, 2020, comprehending 330 delegates aged from 11 to 30 years old, representing 140 countries. We set out to improve upon the structure of the Rio COP to reflect the mandate of young people to build inclusive, equitable, and fair systems. We made the following improvements. Our conference amplified the voice of the marginalized and underrepresented communities. We made time to hear the uncomfortable truths about the global north negligence of the most vulnerable people in our world. And we recognize the valiant effort of the leaders of nations who have contributed least to climate change, but whose people are suffering first and worst.
We actively sought the advice and experience of indigenous elders, whose innate knowledge of and respect for our dependence on the natural world has mostly been ignored.
We did not allow any corporate lobbyists into our mock COP26, and we are free to think outside growth-based economic narratives. We are not shackled by political short-termism and national self-interest. We gave science, optimism, and ambition the center stage, and we are not held back by the pace of the slowest.
2% of our delegates were from the Global South. 63% were female or non-binary. Delegates' average age is 22. The student staff team of 18 young people was a 50% Global North, Global South split, with 70% of student staff female or non-binary.
Our conference was run entirely online, resulting in just around 14 tons of carbon dioxide emissions, compared to around 40,000 tons from the real COP. Through the process of high-level statements made by delegates and policy caucuses, and then voting on the amendments, we formed our legal treaty, which is attached to this letter.
Ask that each and every one of you reads our treaty and considers with an open mind what you can do to implement our policy asks in your country, whilst also building consensus for high ambition at COP26. Prior to COVID-19, we were of the view that governments were both unwilling and unable to take urgent joined-up action in response to an emergency. However, in the past few months, you have delivered dramatic, unilateral and multilateral measures to mitigate the threat of the virus. We now ask that you take equally dramatic and urgent action to stop the threats we face from the climate emergency and the ecological crisis.
Please act with urgency to enact all or part of our treaty in your own country in the run-up to COP26. You can register your intention to implement our treaty by contacting us at treaty@mocop.org or treaty@sosuk.org. Your national delegates or our international student staff team are available to meet with you at your convenience to brief you on COP26 and discuss how we can support you in implementing our treaty. You're very sincerely, COP26 delegates.
Declaration. A global letter to the world. I personally find that so much powerful. Having been affected daily by the climate crisis, this gives me more hope, and I hope it leads to action and change. We are now going to read through the policies of our declaration. Now, therefore, the youth-led mock COP and the young people that it has drawn together from 140 countries of the world, calling upon the world leaders who will be represented at COP26 in 2021 to meet the commitments that they made in Paris Agreement and to endorse the principle, make the following declaration. I'll pass it to Kelo.
Our first policy under climate education. Each country shall ensure that school-age children, regardless of how they are schooled, are provided with comprehensive and up-to-date teaching regarding the climate emergency and ecological crisis. Such teachings shall be adapted to be age and region specific and to give all young people the information they need to enable them to understand the extent, nature, and structural causes of the crisis. The measures which need to be taken to substantially address and reduce the crisis and mitigate and adapt to its consequences. Each country shall implement national laws to ensure free access to impartial climate science and data and provide legal redress against those making false claims relating to the climate emergency and ecological crisis.
Thank you for starting it up, Kelo. Now, the second policy also under climate education says, each country shall ensure that all school-age children, regardless of how they are schooled, are given the opportunity to learn about their connection with nature, including but not limited to drawing upon the knowledge and practices of indigenous people.
Yes. Next up, we have 6 policies under climate justice. The first one states that each country shall extend legal protection to the rights of indigenous peoples, including their land, way of life, and livelihoods, supporting the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Each country shall also implement appropriate and reasonable mechanisms for indigenous peoples to be recognized as rights holders, such as identity certificates.
We must expect and respect our indigenous people. We're definitely highlighting our prioritization on inclusivity by making that our first policy under climate justice. Meanwhile, 2.2 states the UN should formally recognize the human right to a healthy environment, including the right to a safe climate. A UN Universal Declaration on Human Rights of Nature should also be implemented.
Also, under climate justice, we have that each country shall make industrial agriculture, mining, and extractive and other polluting industries responsible in law for upholding sustainable practices and complying with regulations regarding swift and full restoration and cleanup, and the rights of their workers and neighbouring communities. Each country shall ensure that new projects are not undertaken that involve clearing residents off their land without informed consent and/or destroying previously protected ecosystems or sensitive zones. To prevent national governments unduly redefining any protected areas, any changes should be overseen by a National Scientific Advisory Board whose findings should be made transparent to the public.
Amazing, thank you, Josh. Now, under the same theme is 2.4, which state that each country shall introduce a law making the wholesale and deliberate destruction of environments upon which humanity depends of criminal offense of ecocide, with penalties appropriate to it severely and consequent for humanity. And in addition, shall support the introduction of a new international crime of ecocide, capable of prosecution as a crime in the International Criminal Court.
Thank you, Via. Now, the second to the last under climate justice states that each country shall facilitate meaningful and inclusive youth participation in decision-making in all matters relating to climate emergency and ecological crisis at all levels, including, but not limited to, the setting of NDCs. Methods could include making information related to current decision-making available via media, frequented by young people, youth citizen assemblies, facilitating consultations with youth, giving youth a seat at the table to vote on proposed legislation, creating more jobs and internship opportunities for the youth, and sending a minimum number of percentage of youth delegates to climate conferences such as COP26. For the purpose of this policy, we define youth as people aged between 11 to 25 inclusive. Over to you, Carol.
Thank you very much, Corinne. We, the youth, should really have a seat at the table because we need to have a say on our future as well. Before heading up to our next theme, 2.6 of climate justice states that each country shall implement and enforce law to protect, if there is an existing provision, enhance the active participation in decision-making of those in society who advocate addressing environmental issues, social injustice, and corruption, and to protect their safety and their rights to freedom of expression and peaceful assembly.
Wow, I can't believe these policies. They're absolutely incredible and hold so much power. I'm excited to present the next theme, climate resilient livelihood, with its first policy being, each country shall develop and implement a national adaptation plan and provide the funding, training, and resources necessary to enable people and communities to adapt and mitigate as necessary to protect their livelihoods from the consequences of climate emergency and ecological crisis, including the transition needed to mitigate the crisis. This is not limited to, but shall include the provision of reskilling and entrepreneurship skills, programming in renewable and ecological approaches. Over to you, Be.
Yeah, capacity building on a grassroots level is truly the way to create better jobs while protecting our natural resources. Our next policy under the same theme states that the policies and practices of each country and international agencies shall support sustainable agriculture, and regeneration of soils and forests. These shall include measures to assist farmers to move away from agricultural practices which are driving deforestation and are harmful to soil health, food security, water quality, water availability and biodiversity, and to substantially reduce chemical use, greenhouse gas emissions, and pollution from agriculture. Furthermore, policies shall support investing in plant-based food alternatives and technological innovations such as cellular agriculture and implementing policies to combat global food waste.
Thank you, Bee. Wow, I'm feeling so inspired hearing all of these policies. Thank you to all the international staff helping read these. It's really amazing to hear them read so globally. Lastly, under the theme of climate resilient livelihoods, states that 3.3, each country shall commit to a green recovery. Plans for recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic shall not entrench and subsidize fossil fuel use, but shall commit the country to a just and equitable transition to a sustainable and the development of low carbon jobs and opportunities.
It's so exciting to hear all of these policies, and it was great to be part of that process where the delegates created them. Up next is our theme of physical and mental health, which is a topic really important to Mock COP. 4.1. Each country shall ensure a child's right to play, learn, and engage with their natural world by enacting policies to protect and restore biodiversity, such as establishing protected nature reserves, investing in reforestation, and banning mining, logging, and fossil fuel drilling in those protected areas.
This is really cool. Thank you, Josh. Can you all imagine what a beautiful world it would be with a lot of nature around us? Now, next we read 4.2, which is each country shall ensure safe, breathable air quality by adopting strong regulations by adopting strong regulation on air pollutants that require industry and commerce to significantly reduce emissions and pollution. In addition, they shall implement additional social measures to include clean, quality air, including the promotion of pedestrian green zones, affordable and sustainable public transport, and phasing out of internal combustion engines.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Bea. Next up, I'm really excited to introduce policy 4.3. Each country shall provide the necessary funding for child-friendly mental health services, including but not limited to the prevention and treatment of eco-anxiety and the provision of care that directly address climate emergency-related stressors. They shall also recognize the particular vulnerability of children to the impact of climate crisis in terms of its impact on their health and well-being, and proactively address those impacts, including undernutrition, unsafe housing, and the increased risk of physical and mental ill health.
Thank you very much, Pauline. So many policies and such a great effort here. We're nearing the end, but definitely cannot forget the last few. We'll be heading up to the next theme, which is the nationally determined contribution, and its first policy states, each country's plans, program, and laws shall fully align with the IPCC calls to limit global warming to below 1.5 degrees Celsius. The plan needs to take all known greenhouse gas emissions into account, including land use change, forestry, shipping and heavy industry, international flight. Commitments shall genuinely prioritize the radical reduction in greenhouse gas emissions first and not involve offshoring. Any offsetting shall only be done as a last resort and be carried out through schemes that respect the principles of social justice, ownership, and fair trade. And countries shall be transparent about their offshore emissions and clearly state the impact of their environmental policy on developing countries' parties, and in particularly on the least developed countries and small island developing states.
That's beautiful, Kello. That the loophole with offshoring by the developed state was truly controversial thing. Well, another one thing from this team states that Each country's NDCs shall spell out detailed plan and timetable for a whole of society energy transition away from coal, oil, gas, and other fossil fuels, which include a ban on future developments of fossil fuel reserves and a detailed action plan on the sound management of the life cycle of renewable energy equipment.
Definitely. Now, we've got our final theme, something which just developed right after our two-day caucuses with the delegates, and this is protecting biodiversity. Its policy 6.1 states that each country shall commit to ambitious targets and the funding and actions to deliver them for the protection and restoration of at least 30% of land and marine ecosystems by 2030. These must benefit biodiversity, sequester carbon, and ensure the integrity of Indigenous peoples and local communities' rights. Then last but not the least, states that each country and a national at international level shall phase out all non-essential single-use plastics, taking into account the needs of people with disabilities, and introduce a circular system of all materials which promotes reuse and repair instead of single use and continually uses existing waste streams to make new products instead of continuing to rely on oil-based or bio-based virgin materials. And that is all from all our policies right now.
Wow, I'm not even sure to begin. You just heard all the policies the youth delegates of COP26 chose to include in the treaty. This treaty is a powerful statement to world leaders, telling them what the youth of the world want to see done to address the climate crisis, meet the Paris Agreement, and come to COP26 prepared to strengthen their ambitions. Without going any further, I want to rightfully give a huge thank you to the incredible lawyers that helped us create this statement. Julia, William, Ellie, and Nina, among others, who contributed and helped immensely with the crafting of the delegates' ideas into legal policies. So thank you to all of you on behalf of the staff and delegates for your amazing work on this treaty.
Thank you very much. I would like now to give the floor to Nigel Topping to say something about our statements. Welcome.
Thank you, Pauline. Can I just check how long have I got? Because I could talk forever. I'm so excited about your statement. Just make sure I don't go on too long. How long have I got?
You can go on for as long as you want. Probably no more than like 15 minutes. Probably.
Okay, great. I mean, first of all, incredible, really powerful statement. You know, specific, broad, ambitious, you know, clearly grounded in a very deep understanding of the issues. You know, I'm impressed and I'm moved, actually. I want to say thank you for everything that you managed to achieve. You know, you can tell that's the work of a lot of very dedicated, smart people. It's great, and you know, I hear you calling out the lawyers there that you've had, you know, so and I know I have some idea what it's like to put together an event like this. You know, my team and I had two weeks of Race to Zero dialogues. We're all exhausted at the end, so I'm sure you're all going to sleep well. So thank you for putting this together over so many time zones to get to such a strong outcome, such a big team, so many delegates, so many countries, so much commitment to diversity. And you've already shown the broad reach that you've achieved, and I'm sure you'll get a lot more in the weeks and months to come. Yeah, I particularly want to call out your commitment to diversity. You know, we you know, Gonzalo and I really focus on that. We got to 51%, 49% in our gender diversity, which is pretty good. But you have to work really hard at it, right? Because there's so many structural biases built in gender terms and in North-South terms. So really well done on that. Gonzalo and I, my team, are learning a lot from what you're doing. Let me say a little bit about youth leadership, a little bit about the event, and then I want to come to the specifics of the statement. You know, we are seeing more and more ambition from non-state actors, and your leadership is part of that. It's helping to drive it along. You know, whether it's millions of young people on a strike, or whether it's one teenager looking their mum or dad in the eyes and saying, what are you doing about climate change, mum or dad, if you're the CEO of a big company or the mayor of a city, right? So the individual ask is sometimes just as powerful as the mass ask. And never forget that. We never hear about the individual asks, but they all count. I think that Gonzalo and we launched this Race to Zero campaign just 6 months ago, and we've been really encouraged by the momentum. And that's focused on building an overwhelming signal that the whole of society wants to get to zero as quickly as possible, and that we know how to get there, and more and more people are on the paths. And it's not just about the end goal, it's about specificity about what to do in the short term. I think Gonzalo and I often talk about the need for urgency, ambition, and action, and everything that you've done represents those three qualities of urgency, ambition, and action in a really strong way. And I think it's also very clear that this is young people everywhere who are driving the change, who are one thing I just want to say, I think, can we work really hard at not making this your generation against my generation? Because I think we have to come together, those of us who are alive today, to solve this problem for all those unborn generations yet to come. And some of you may have heard me say this before. I read the history of the moonshot a few months ago, and the head engineer was someone my age, like in their 50s, running mission control. But two young engineers, one at MIT and one at NASA, in your age group, right, in their early 20s, were people who had to make the critical decisions when the Eagle was landing and the computer stopped working, whether or not to abort the mission or not. So I love that as this combination of the clarity and the passion and the energy of youth with the experience of elders. We have to come together. And just some examples of where I see youth leading and working as part of a community of leadership, whether it's in India with young people protecting the forests in Goa. And I love those letters earlier on, that really impassioned letters. And I think that it can be a scientific voice. It can also be a poetic voice that breaks through, right? So I thought those were really powerful, and you read them out beautifully. In the UK, just a couple of weeks ago, we had young people as young as 6 in the Youth Climate Action Summit that I was privileged to take part of. Anyone who sees those, I tell you, 6-year-olds can be a political force, right? Because it's moving and it connects you to the responsibility as adults to look after the generations to come and the youngest in society. It also showed the power of education. Some of those young people, after just a day of climate lessons, were able to articulate very clearly what they wanted for the future in a way they wouldn't have been able to without the education. So I love the inclusion of education. We've also seen, of course, the youth movements in the USA having a significant impact on the election and on the policies and the ambition, the policies of President-elect Biden. And across Africa, networks like Resilient 40 and the Africa Youth Climate Hub are on the front lines working with communities already experiencing, as we've heard from Philippines and elsewhere in the video earlier. So, and you know many more examples than I do, but they're everywhere. So I think that both the global voice that you've created here, but also the local voices are really important. Let me just repeat some of what I said about this event. Again, really impressed. I think you are bringing the world's attention to the urgency and the need. Some of the highlights I've heard from delegates of Eritrea talking about water shortages affecting her country now, and the devastating outcomes that has for people and nature. Delegate from Kenya talking about this asymmetry about contributing the least and yet foundations of its economy, like tourism, forestry, and fishing, being under severe threat. And then the small island states, right? We heard earlier about Fiji. Also heard from Tonga about natural disasters destroying crop plantations. And then the delegate from Bangladesh talking about the 6.5 million people being displaced due to rising sea levels. And those personal stories really help, right? And I remember at the end of COP21 in Paris, when so many people had fought for the breakthrough of the clear goals and the keeping 1.5 alive. Tony de Bruin, who was from the Marshall Islands, who was leading the small island states delegation, right at the end, I remember him saying to Laurent Fabius, who had been the president of the COP, saying something like "Brother Laurent," and I was on the front row, and there was a screen like 30 feet, 10 meters wide with Tony's face, full of emotion. I remember him saying, "Brother Laurent, I want to thank you. We feel listened to for the first time." So we need to keep bringing. We need to keep diversity of voices in the conversation. We need to keep listening to each other, young to old, privileged to safe to vulnerable, because the voice of vulnerable demographies and communities does change the politics again in the COP and around it. So I think that, you know, these stories, as well as the specific, it's a sort of head and heart that you're bringing, which I really love. I think you've got real ambition in the statement, which you should do. I'm really pleased. I was really pleased to be interviewed on Channel 4 in that statement, which got you great coverage. And they asked me what I was expecting. The one thing I said I was expecting was ambition, and you've delivered on that. You've also touched on all the important aspects, from education to justice to livelihoods to health and well-being, and of course the NDCs. And I'm glad you've added biodiversity, and sounds like you added that in at the end. You know, we're going to need to make rapid progress on all of those. It's a really complicated agenda, and there's lots of things that we have to undo and pivot as we're doing it. So let me just say something about your letter, and then I want to go to the declaration. So the letter, I want to say one thing that's just maybe something I would have advised slightly differently, but not a really big deal. And then two things that I really love. There's a little bit of a tone of sarcasm in your, you know, presumably you thought this a lesser priority. Now you're entitled to be sarcastic, because I know you're entitled to be sarcastic, impatient, annoyed, right? So a little bit of sarcasm, sometimes quite a useful rhetorical tool. I think, though, it's important to understand that the reason for the delay was that actually mostly the small countries and the most vulnerable countries wanted to delay because they really wanted to feel that they could participate fully. And actually all of the countries, 196, are in dialogues right now. They're running, the UN and the countries are running 2 weeks of climate dialogues, trying to move forward some of the sensitive. So it wasn't that they kicked the can down the road, as somebody said earlier. They made a conscious decision that in order to have the full consensus-based process with the voices of the most vulnerable countries really heard, those countries themselves say, we prefer to delay for a year so we can be there in person in those conversations. So I understand why you say that, but I want you to know that. I think it's not quite accurate to say it's been kicked down the road. The two bits I love about the letter are that you talk about putting science, I wrote it down, science, optimism, and ambition at the center. I think that's crystal clear and really important. And I wholeheartedly, and I know Gonzalo wholeheartedly back that call for science at the heart of everything. That's why Gonzalo and I always say we've got to get to zero as soon as possible. We think even 2050 is a sort of, it's a date, it's a neat date, but the science says as soon as possible. If we can wave a magic wand and do it tomorrow, we'd do it tomorrow. Optimism, I mean, you know, I'm sure you've all heard Christiana Figueres talk about stubborn optimism. It's such an important quality. It's possible to get overwhelmed and depressed, but you know, nothing positive comes from being overwhelmed and depressed. We have to keep picking ourselves up and choosing to hope, believing that we can avoid the worst and create a much better future. And you've spoken to that beautifully. And ambition. So I love that, science, optimism, and ambition. And finally, I think your request is really thoughtful and intelligent and heartfelt. You said request to read and consider with an open mind. I think that's actually beautifully phrased. Please read and consider with an open mind. It's not hectoring. It's not finger pointing. It's heartfelt. I think that's really smart. And you draw the parallel with the virus response, which shows what we can do.
Oh, sorry, Nigel. I think you've just hit mute.
Got so excited I hit mute. Sorry.
It's good excitement.
Yeah. So let me talk about the declaration. Look, we've only got 11 months now till Glasgow. So I think your declaration is an inspiration for me and for my team. We will talk about it, and we could go over every paragraph, right? And you've done it so beautifully. It gives us fuel, as I said earlier. When your generation stands up, it doesn't. You're also helping everyone else who's been working at this for a long time to feel like they're not doing it on their own, right? Which can sometimes feel like when the odds are so stacked. It gives us fuel as we continue to ramp up the race to zero, and as we get ready to launch a race for resilience. Particularly, you've got some lovely specific ask about resilience in there, and it also gives us real hope for how different parts of society, different parts of the world can come together, because we're very clear this is something which requires the whole of society, right? It's not going to be just governments or just your generation or just business or just anything. It's going to require us all. So let me highlight a couple of areas where I'm particularly keen that we can align our work as the champions and as the Marrakesh Partnership of partners around the world with your declaration. First is on climate resilient livelihoods. I think it's absolutely fundamental that we need to find ways together to provide the resources to enable people and communities to adapt to the existing impacts. I've had about 5 resilience dialogues with organizations, grassroots and grass tops in Southeast Asia, South Asia, Africa, Latin America, and we've got more coming up next year, hearing from people who are working to build resilient communities. One thing that's really I like about your statement is sometimes this agenda, because of the importance of the negotiated piece of the agenda, focuses on the 100 billion, which is really important. I know there's a lot of people expecting to see that delivered and working on it, but that's only part of the story. And sometimes if you only focus on that, you can get a sense that that nothing's happening. And one thing I've been really inspired by is the way that communities on the front line are using the resources they have in incredibly creative ways to build more resilience. It's not enough, right? We need to do so much more. So that's why we're going to be launching the Race for Resilience, and we will be putting lives and livelihoods at the heart of that campaign. So the mitigation, Race to Zero, is a bit more about technology, but Race for Resilience will be much more about lives and livelihoods. So I think we're very aligned there. I think it's also interesting that you included physical and mental health. I think that if I'm honest, that we haven't thought specifically about mental health, so that's a challenge. I think that what we're trying to do mainly with mental health is try and have more opportunities for engagement and give more reasons to hope by showing that we can do this and that people are committed. I mean, that's not the whole bit of mental health, that's part of it. Certainly physical health, I think that the COVID crisis has really elevated the health voice. I was actually just talking to the head of the English National Health Service. They've committed net zero 2040, right? And they're trying to now think about how they can bring all their suppliers, and we're working with Healthcare for Climate. You know, there's millions of healthcare professionals calling. So I think that the health agenda, particularly clean air in our cities, right, is something that Maria Naira from the World Health Organization reminded us when we launched the Race to Zero, that 7 million people are dying prematurely every year because of air pollution, and that's caused by the same causes as climate change, basically cars and coal, as I like to say. So I think we can really align that. On the NDCs, I think that your point about us needing clear plans for all sectors is really important. Patricia Espinosa in the Race to Zero dialogues reminded us that when we were talking about transport, still many NDCs don't have specific measures on transport, right? And we now know that we can go much faster than we thought. I mean, I've been working on the phase out of combustion engines in particular, and as I keep telling people, in 2016, the IEA said that would take until the 2070s. And as you know, countries like the Netherlands and the UK have now said no more combustion engine cars from 2030. So why can't we get every country to do that? And I think buses and trucks, we can also bring those dates forward much clearer. So we, Gonzalo pioneered this with the Marrakesh Partnership last year, the publication of 1.5 degree climate action pathways. And we're publishing version 2 of those in a couple of weeks, and we'll keep improving those. So we'd love to see your thoughts on those, your input into those, your thoughts about where they're ambitious enough, where they might be more ambitious. We've reached out to the scientific community to sense check them, but we're always keen to keep improving those. The idea is to create a blueprint, basically. So if everybody followed these pathways, we'd get to zero in the 40s, and actually in some cases much sooner. Climate justice, you talked about many critical topics there about the right, including rights of Indigenous people and land rights, and meaningful participation, meaningful youth participation. I agree the world will look very different if every boardroom and parliament had young people with a seat at the table, maybe even not a voting seat. I mean, I think that I've seen when I worked in business in Germany, having representatives of the workforce on the supervisory board changes the conversation. And I've said publicly that I think it would be great if a young person had a seat on the board of every listed company. Some companies have explored that. That's probably quite a long way in the future, but I think many companies have advisory boards. That would be a start, right, to have younger voices. And Gonzalo and I and the team, actually, I have to admit, pushed by our young team members, have recently launched a Race to Zero Youth Fellowship program, which will, I'm glad our definition overlaps with yours. We said, we're looking for young professionals up to 30 to join the team to help us drive ambitious climate action and to have a stronger youth voice in the team. So I think finally, as you take this declaration forward to the, I was going to say, I don't know why we say four corners of the world, to all the continents of the world, including Antarctica. I know couldn't join us today. I want you to know that Gonzalo and I, we see ourselves as champions, not as in the winners, as in the world champions, but as the champions, as in advocates for ambition. So we will take your declaration and your spirit with us in our hearts and our heads wherever we go. And I'd like to encourage you to continue to be really specific, as you have been at a global level, but also in your local work. What do you want businesses to do? Like, tell car companies to commit to a date when they will build their last combustion engine car. Tell mayors what you want them to do. That always depends on the locality, right? Do you want car-free streets like Barcelona is pioneering, or do you want carbon-free zones? I mean, or do you want better waste services? Do you want the city to take a lead on banning single-use plastics? You will know that's a lot about, some mobilization needs to be global, some needs to be local. Gonzalo and I believe very strongly in what we call the ambition loop, is that when you raise ambition in one part of the system, it creates a feedback loop. So when we get cities to be bolder, it encourages business to be bolder. When we get business to be bolder, it encourages policymakers to be bolder. So every time you get anyone to improve, don't think of it as just that improvement. Think of that as having an influence around the whole system. Also, I think clear long-term goals like coal phase out dates, combustion engine phase out dates, the 30% biodiversity and marine targets that are very aligned with our pathways, they really help galvanize people to be more innovative. So keep setting the bar high. We know that we need to keep coming together, as you have across continents. We need to come together across generations to tackle this crisis, as I said, on behalf of ourselves, but future generations. That's why I believe this forum that you've created is incredibly important. And I know there will be more fora where the youth voice is included, or where it's the main voice, like the youth COP next year. We look forward to working with you and your peers to make that a success. I'd like to end, first of all, by thanking you, and then I want to read a quote. I want to thank you all personally, every one of you that I can see on the screen now, and every one of you behind, and every one of the 330 delegates, for your leadership. This is, leadership doesn't always mean being in charge of a big organization. It means deciding to act when you see a need for action, and you've all made that leadership decision. It always requires a sense of responsibility and courage and a certain sense of generosity, because you're doing it for others. So I want to thank you all for your spirit of leadership. I want to congratulate you for an amazing event and an ambitious and professional and inspiring declaration. And I want to end with a quote. We're all trying to grapple with this incredibly complex challenge. We can simplify it to, we've just got to get to zero, which is helpful sometimes, but then we've got to act, and we've got to untangle all sorts of complex systems that we're all trapped in some way. So one of my inspirations is the amazing systems thinker Donella Meadows. She's sadly no longer with us. Some of you may have heard of her. She was one of the authors of the original Limits to Growth book, which said we can't keep growing the physical size of the economy in a finite planet. That's why I should be thrilled to see your references to circularity in your statement. But she wrote a book called Thinking in Systems in 2008, and I really recommend it to any of you. She also wrote some smaller essays if you haven't got the time. But really helpful to think about this kind of work that we're all doing, right, to try and transform whole systems. And I think that the kind of interconnectedness that is at the heart of the challenge and the beauty when we come together is summed up in just a few lines from her, which I want to read, and then I'll close. She says, "Living successfully in a world of complex systems means expanding the horizons of caring. No part of the human race is separate either from other human beings or the global ecosystem. It will not be possible in this integrated world for the rich in Los Angeles to succeed if the poor in Los Angeles fail, or for Europe to succeed if Africa fails, or for the global economy to succeed if the global environment fails. We're all in this together, and we will succeed or fail together. Thank you for your leadership. Anything I can do to help build on the momentum. Let's ramp up ambition, urgency, and action on the race to zero and get to Glasgow in a very different place than we are now. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for that. It was really inspiring. It was really great to hear from you as well. And it was amazing to hear about how your work really links to lots of the same core points that we've tried to raise. Really great, especially to hear about how your work so involves looking at the impact climate change has, seeing it as a human issue that really does impact people's lives directly. It's just really great to hear that. Do you have any specific advice for when we're trying to talk to world leaders, to get world leaders aware of what our statement is, the policies we've included? Do you have any specific advice about how we could go about that?
I think, I mean, you know, this is a political campaign you're running, right? Somebody once said to me, the political campaign, any campaign starts with a spreadsheet. So I think it can be overwhelming, right? Because it's so big, but think very clearly about who are you trying to influence? What do you want them to do? And who can deliver the credible message to them? So, as I said, and there are a lot of people who are allies of yours. You don't have to do it on your own. Find out who's already working. I'll give you an example. This morning, I was talking and at a group called En Route to Zero with coordinated by SlowCat, which is an organization that's working on transport decarbonisation, with the Dutch transport minister. She's very clear. They've banned combustion engines 2030. They're trying to bring forward the end of combustion engines for freight to 2035. So you're not on your own, right? You can, and that's so if you're trying to make an economic argument, point to other actors. So if you can point, so I was, if you're working in a country and you want the transport minister to set a date for the phase out of the combustion engine, you know, do your homework as you very clearly can from this, and tell them who's already doing that. Look, you're not on your own. There's the transport ministers in Costa Rica, in Norway, in the Netherlands, and UK have already done this. Tell them about the economic arguments that batteries are coming down in cost every 20 years. Tell them about the healthcare argument. Maybe get the health minister on board that, you know, cleaner cars means less health costs. So I think just be clear about when are you broadcasting and when are you narrowcasting, because I think we need both, right? I think that what you're doing right now is you've done the broadcast, then you've got to go into narrowcast, country by country, minister by minister, company by company. And again, there's lots of people who can help. There's lots of people who are tracking how ambitious individual NDCs are, who are working to try and get companies to be more ambitious. So I think my number one piece of advice would be keep up the quality of your thinking and be forensic about who you're trying to influence and what you want them to do.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And it's great to hear that there's so many people who are out there doing so much great work. It's really great to hear. And it'll be great to try and make use of some of those connections and to talk to more people about it. Malika, do you want to add something?
I think, yeah, you covered it really well. And I was just so appreciative to have you here with us, Nigel, to share all the work that you're doing and how possible it is to get this treaty incorporated into countries. And we're really looking forward to this next phase. So yeah, we'll just start into a little conversation bit here. So it's a little sad to see this all come to an end, but I think it's been a really exciting journey, and we're really excited to see where it's going to take us in the next year. Yeah, over to you, B then.
Yeah, before we continue on to what's about to happen next, we will first introduce this quote coming from one of those who developed our treaty, from Sir William Wilson. Sorry, I keep saying sir. And I know in British there's like a terminology for sir, but yeah. So from William Wilson of Wise Side Consulting, one of those who developed the treaty, he said that it has been a privilege to work with such a committed and inspiring group of young people. I hope they will be fired up to continue this important work by encouraging their own countries to keep going to make the Paris Agreement commitments a reality. And yes, after that, it is really, really emotional to conclude this in this closing ceremony. It's been a very wonderful 2 weeks for everyone, and for us, it's been a wonderful several months of part-time work and so on and so forth. But yeah, right now, it's very emotional. Like, our delegates have been messaging us on Instagram saying thank you, and they just appreciate all the staff and all the hard work that they've put in. But yeah, for now, everybody just has to tune in on our social media for further announcements, as well as to check on our website, mockup.org, for our full statement. There's a lot more ahead up until the COP26.
Amazing, thank you, B. Josh, is there anything you wanted to add there onto the specifics of what we'll be doing in the next year?
Yeah, so although this is the end of the conference, it's the last day, and it's sad to see it finish. It's really just the start of MockCop. We're moving on to the next part of the journey, where we, like Nigel has mentioned, where we talk to world leaders, we talk to other generations, and we really try to make this statement a reality. We start to talk to people about the policies that have been voted in, why they've been voted in, why they're important. And it really is just the start of the journey. And it's so exciting. And although there might not be any more of this conference left anymore, you can still catch up. You can watch all of the videos, all of the speeches, you can catch up on the panels. And it'll be really great to have that resource for people to see. We've got some great academic videos about what particular things mean. And it's really exciting to have all of that. I think I might hand over to somebody to do a conclusion now.
All right, okay, we've now come to the end of this program, and on behalf of the team, I would like to thank all attendees for participating and following us throughout the 2 weeks event. This wouldn't have been possible without your involvement. Thank you, guys.
And to our delegates, a huge thank you to you for staying with the cause for the planet, for fighting so hard, and your incredible contributions and input towards our treaty. Our treaty would truly not exist without our delegates.
And to our amazing team of volunteers, thank you for all your immense contributions to the success of this program. We're very grateful.
We would like to thank our funders and sponsors for believing in us. We wouldn't have done this without your kind support. Thank you to UMI Foundation, Climate Aid Invest, the Climate Change Collaboration, the Golden Bottle Trust, Holden Putnam Charitable Foundation, Esme Fairbairn Foundation. We have the power, and all our supporters, including the over 500 individuals that donated to our crowdfunder. Thank you again for believing in us.
And to our legal team and fact takers, you guys are the best. Thank you all for all your efforts.
And we will not forget to thank our incredible speakers, panelists, and all others who contributed to our event in so many different ways. Thank you for your contributions to help make the success of this program.
And to us, and also to our supporting organizations for amplifying our voices through their network. We thank you too.
And lastly, I want to thank our host organization, SOS UK, Students Organizing for Sustainability, and our amazing team of adult staff for giving us the platform to make this happen. You have been the most incredible support system for us as student staff. And although this event was run by youth, As youth, we know we couldn't have done it without your support. So I'll now pass it over to Kello for a final thank you. And if the student staff have their video on, they can say thank you. So.
All right, thank you all. Personally, this past few weeks has been very emotional and inspiring for me, seeing youth from all across the world working together to draft the high-level statement. And now that we have our high-level statement, we will continue to build the momentum and the pressure to drive the political will for countries to adopt and implement our treaty and for the ambitious outcome of COP26 next year. Thank you guys once again. We're so happy to have you all supporting us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got a short video that is a highlight of what's happened at Mock COP so far, and it's got some of our favourite parts. So just gonna play that now. Hopefully. Oh, I don't think it's not up. We won't do that. It will be on YouTube at some point. And just a reminder that our full treaty can be read online on our website, www.mockcop.org/treaty. And there you can see our letter to world leaders. And you can also see our declaration, our global declaration produced by all of those students from around the world. And here is the video. So this is a highlights video of Mock COP.
I'm fighting to save our planet and our future. People always tell me that you are too young to get involved in such activism. But I prove them that age doesn't matter to make a difference.
There are many Bahamian youth, too numerous to mention, that are putting themselves front and center in the development of critical climate policy, a forum where youth were once shut out.
The Philippines is suffering the brunt of the climate crisis despite contributing so little.
Youth involvement and participation in decision-making is a must. We refuse to inherit a dead planet.
The world and its people deserve to know, understand, and implement climate action about a crisis that will seal humankind's fate forever. So y'all better start working.
Greetings, I'm James Thornton, the founder and CEO of Client Earth. Decisions taken by governments now will affect the youngest generation for years to come. It's time to listen to young people and implement their urgent demands.
It was so cool. Thank you, everyone. You're so strong. Yeah, I'm a little sad because it is going to the end, but thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And we hope to see you on our journey through the next year up to COP26. And we hope to see much more ambition in COP26. And we're really excited to see what comes out.
All right, good evening. You're from the Philippines.
So this is a see you soon.